So, after the dramatic round 3 at Beijing to finish off the first 3 flyaway races, it was on to round 4 in Tondela in Portugal for the first of the European rounds of the season. Many teams decided to bring much needed updates to their cars after seeing how they performed during the first 3 rounds of the season. Several teams did that, and several teams did that. The Lucky Strike team brought some new aerodynamics for their cars, along with the Rizzardo team and the Asia Road Racing team, who were genuinely surprised at the pace of their cars. Several others also brought updates like new gearboxes, specifically for the Rizzardos that have been struggling with acceleration. And several other teams brought new specification brakes. A few brought new specification engines as well, and several other things as well. All in a bid to try and get up further up the field. Qualifying would yield some interesting results. As several things didn't play out as people expected, with Harry Chapman and Zoe Sharp on the front row for once, with Neil Asari and Nina Holtz on the second row, with Flexer down in fifth, a surprise for him. Aki Lipinen and Vasquez were on row 4 as usual. Vasquez, a known good driver at this track. North 9th, along with Iker Vidal sneaking into the Q3 yet again. Samuel Blanc 12th with a frustrated Olivier 13th. De Graaf 14th, and not finding the pace on this circuit. Gonzalez and Hamrin alongside each other yet again. Siri Lundqvist sneaking into Q2 in her Verlan. Prachapatia was 20th, which was a decent result for him, saying the car was simply okay. And Lucia Flores and Jeremy Woodford were on the back row of the grid. A disappointment for Flores in particular, who basically was celebrating her home Grand Prix this weekend. As for Jeremy Woodford, he simply could not get the pace in the car, saying, quote, The car's fast. Vidal's proven that. I just simply don't know what tricks he's using to go faster on this track than I am. Bright lights came on for the start of the Portuguese Grand Prix. The lights went out, and the way they went for the start of the race, with a brilliant start from Sharp until she locked up and ran wide in turn 1, followed quickly by Aki Lipinen, along with several others, including the Van Dorn of Wolfgang Schmidt. There was contact. Meanwhile, while cars were going off the track, there was contact in the midfield between Javier Vasquez and another car, which then led to a crash by Javier Vasquez. A shame for him, as he was looking set to have a good race. Wolfgang Schmidt was eventually discovered to have caused the damage and given a drive-through penalty for his troubles. After a short safety car, though, to clear the mess, the race got going for real. With the Steinman of Chapman leading the way, followed by Sharp, Wexler, Holtz in the second Steinman, and then the second Rossini of Sarian. With the rest of the field behind the unlikely candidate of Iker Vidal running 6th place. A neat little drive for him as he had snuck up through the chaos up into 6th place. Lap 8 of the race, and Sharp trying to make up for her blunder earlier, was stuck in traffic as she was battling the midfield runners. Her soft tires starting to fade at around the lap 10 mark. She was trying to get by the Asia Road Racing of Hamrin, but Hamrin stubbornly refused to let her by. Meanwhile, the front 4, however, were having their own battle. As Wexler tried to make a move on Chapman for the lead, Nina Holtz took the opportunity to dive into the pit lane for a fresh set of tires to try and gain the advantage. While the cameras were looking at Holtz going into the pit lane, Sarian took the opportunity into turn 1 to dive bomb his teammate and take second place off of him. The racing was quite fierce up at the front, but would it last at this notoriously tricky track to pass on, as Holtz made a move to get past some slower traffic. Later, a few laps after Holtz pitted, Oliviera came out of nowhere with with her Windsor doing surprisingly well on those soft tires that she started the race on. Having not made it into Q3, she was on fresher tires and simply just went faster and went around them. She was flying on those tires as the front runners who started on their Q2 tires were struggling. In fact, Olivia was going so quickly that she had passed Wexler, passed Chapman, and then, to the surprise of everybody, simply just drove around Nilo Saarinen and into the lead. Truly stunning stuff from Oliveira and the Windsor car, showing it's pretty good and kind to its tires, and also showing how detrimental old tires were for the front runners, which showed that Holtz's strategy was perhaps working as she had caught and was about to pass Zoe Sharp off screen. In the meantime, Lucia Flores spun in the meantime after being put under pressure by Esteban Ribeiro, and then at the end of lap 15, after being passed by Oliveira, Chapman decided now was the time to pit and came out in a horde of traffic. Followed quickly two laps later by Schmidt, by Wexler and Surikov, who also pitted and also came out in the same traffic jam. But a key thing was Dieter Wexler was on the hard tire. He was looking to make no more stops the rest of the race. It was an interesting strategy call from the Rossini driver, and it would be interesting to see if his strategy worked out. Meanwhile, while all that was going on, Oliveira had pitted in the remaining pit cycle for the soft runners, and as the medium tire window opened for those who had started on that tire, Oliveira and Vidal were flying. Until Oliveira flew straight into the side of Samuel Blanc's car, going for a 3-wide move up the middle, which yielded a puncture and front wing damage for Oliveira, and a puncture and suspension damage for Samuel Blanc. Both cars knocking both cars effectively out of the hunt for points. A shame too, as both drivers were doing very well up until the incident occurred. Meanwhile, Iker Vidal, the third party in all this, got away scot-free and carried on his way. Until he came across a very interesting challenge. Trying to hold off the Panther of Sharp, which he couldn't, and then the hard shot runner of Dieter Wexler, which he could, for a short time at least. Vidal showing his superior knowledge of this track and was doing a really good job defending. That Cosworth car showing quite a bit of pace in the middle stages of the race. But could he keep it up and finally score the team's first point of the season after having 3 races of truly terrible luck to start off the year? Only time would find out as the second pit stop window began. Lap 35 though, and more things were happening. Saarinen and Holtz had both managed to bolt away from the rest of the field thanks to Wexler's hard tires and a late pit stop and the late first stop for Chapman. And now Holtz was on the attack versus the Rossini driver, as she was putting the pressure on, trying to see if she could get her first win of the season. It was looking good for Holtz as Saarine's soft tires were starting to fade, while Holtz's mediums were perfectly fine. And Dieter Wexler was also starting to gain as well, and as his teammate dove into the pits at the end of lap 35. With over 25 to go, Saarinen came in for yet another set of soft tires, followed quickly by Surikov. Both of them would appear to be going for the legendary 3-stop strategy at this track, which has worked so well in the past. But would it work now? Would it work this time? Was to be determined. The soft tires had looked particularly poor in this season so far. Meanwhile, a couple laps later, Nina Holtz dove into the pit lane for medium tires, looking to go to the end, whereas Saarinen would have to stop one more time. Holtz, on the bright side, came out in front of teammate Chapman, and after half a lap of a bit of looking and prodding, Holtz firmly said no to that, and promptly began to pull away from her teammate as the tires finally got up to temperature. Up ahead, though, Wexler was now in front of them, but would he be able to hold on for 20 more laps? The answer would soon be found out as no, as as Wexler's hard tires, while still in decent condition, were starting to fade versus were no match for the fresh and medium tires that Holtz and Chapman both had, as both of them just cleanly drove right around the Rossini driver. First Holtz did it around the outside in Sector 2. After a brilliant defense from Wexler, it was no match as Holtz managed to sneak by. Followed quickly by Chapman 2 corners later, outmuscling the Rossini in the braking zone of the final corner and moving on ahead up into second and third respectively for the two. Further back after a fairly anonymous race, though, Maria Gonzalez became only the second retirement of the race with a gearbox failure on her Van Dork car. A shame for her, as she was running ninth at the time and was looking on course to potentially score a point. This promoted De Graaf up into 9th, and Anna Oliveira, who was still in the race, back up into 10th for the time being. As with just over 10 laps to go, Neil Osarian came in for his final stop, coming out ahead of teammate Wexler in third place. Now everybody would see the true test. Could Neil Osarian win the race by chasing down the two Steinmans and taking the win for himself, as Wexler was looking out of contention to win this race and stop the Steinmans from getting another win? Further back, Vidal was still running a credible 8th. Sharp had recovered a 5th after her lap 1 blunder. Surkov was back into 6th, and Vidal was trying to chase down Aki Lipinen. But further ahead, after several laps of catching, Neil Osarian was on the charge, neatly overtaking Chapman for second place with just over 7 laps to go. Then 2 laps later, coming to just under 5 to go, Iker Vidal finally caught and passed Aki Lipinen, of all people, for 7th place. Vidal trying to get more points on the board for the Cosworth team, so they would not have to worry about any sort of issues. Meanwhile, while that was happening and that battle concluded in Vidal's favor, Neil Osarian had finally caught Nina Holtz, and the two began the duel with 5 laps to go for the win of the race. Osarian's fresher softs versus Holtz's older mediums, but the cars were fairly evenly matched, and so were the drivers and talent. It looked to be a potentially interesting battle until Osarian firmly shut the door by just blowing by Holtz on the straight, getting into the chicane first, and then promptly pulling away from Nina Holtz. Osarian looking set for the win, with just a few laps to go. What was not looking certain was Dieter Wexler's tires, as with just over 2 laps to go, he locked up on his hard tires once again after struggling all race on them, and finally punctured his right front tire, having to dive into the pit lane for a new set of tires to finish the last 2 laps of the race. This dropped him behind Iker Vidal into 7th place, which was already bad enough for him, as Aki Lipinen directly behind them also punctured his tire, but he was less fortunate as it happened into turn 1, which led to Aki to crawl around the track on a flat tire for an entire lap. This promoted Oliveira, his teammate, up into 9th place, and it also promoted Rick De Graaf, who had made a 3rd stop off screen, up into 10th. A brilliant thing for De Graaf after the Reserves had struggled a bit throughout this race. But coming onto the final lap, they went, and everything was seeming fine until Dieter Wexler spun in turn 1 on the final lap, promoting Iker Vidal up into 6th place. With a healthy enough margin over Wexler, Iker Vidal was looking set for a brilliant P6. But it still wasn't over. It still wasn't over, as after Lippiton pitted and came out in 16th, Rick DeGraff was looking on Aki's teammate Oliveira for ninth place as Nilo Sarin crossed the finish line to win the race, a healthy 7 seconds ahead of Nina Holtz and a decent bit ahead of Harry Chapman as well. With the two Panthers coming home 4th and 5th, Iker Vidal celebrating across the finishing line in P6 for a brilliant result for him and his new team, with Wexler coming home a frustrating 8th, Olivier managing to steal P8 off of Schmidt coming to the start-finish line to get 8th after the mid-race collision with Blanc. Schmidt coming home 9th after a fairly anonymous race, and Rick DeGraff coming home 10th to steal the final point. Even Samuel Blanc finishing 11th after his collision with Olivier as well. So a great recovery drive from Olivier and Blanc. It was just a shame that Blanc was not able to capitalize. But after that, Sarin was the winner, and the next race was in Munich in a couple weeks' time.